Okay, ready?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good morning again. My name's Elaine Pugh, and I grew up in Pennsylvania in what we call deer country. This is a photo of what my mom took one day outside the kitchen window. Through the screen, sure enough, you see a deer, which was not unusual. They literally go right through the yard. Okay, trying to get to go to slide 2. Okay, we have a very simple agenda today. First of all, I'm going to discuss the love-hate relationship we tend to have with deer. Then we'll cover deer basics, deer and eating, plants they don't eat, and then I'll go into why they don't eat them. Oops. This is what my kids see when you think of deer. This is the love-hate relationship. Bambi, you don't want to hurt Bambi. This is what my husband sees, venison. And then this is what a gardener sees. Look at this is deer browsing damage on arborvitae. And you can't replace that. Those are huge trees. This was damaged by a herd of deer. So let's go to some deer basics. This is the scientific name for deer, and it means hollow teeth, and it relates to the teeth in the deer. Adult height, I don't seem to have a pointer, is from 6 to 7.75 feet. The length is from 4 to 6.5 feet. Adult weighs from 95 to 190 pounds. The bucks weigh more than the doe, even though according to National Geographic, they can weigh up to 300 pounds. I have never seen one that heavy. The speed is up to 30 miles per hour. They can leap as high as 10 feet and leap as far as 30 feet in a single bound. A deer eating fact, they can eat 4 to 6 pounds of food per day for every 100 pounds of body weight. And I look at this and I just think, okay, what has he just eaten? He's got a mouthful of something. It's one of my garden plants. Oops. Okay, and why are the deer eating your plants? I talked to the Fairfax County wildlife biologist, Catherine Edwards, and she said that a healthy, in deer facts as well, it says a healthy ecosystem can support 15 to 20 deer per square mile, which is 640 acres. The Fairfax County Parks is where they do the management of the deer, and they have a whole deer management program. And the estimate for the deer population is 40 to 100 deer per square mile. So they are exceeding the population density. And then she said, and also deer have expanded to consider residential yards as part of their territory. They are creatures of habit. They're edge creatures. They tend to live in the woods, and they have their standard pattern they seem to do every single day. And some people say by clockwork, we know right when the deer are going to be there. And of course, our garden plants are tasty. Okay, so what can we do about it? As master gardeners, we use the integrated pest management manual. And there are 3 different methods. We have cultural, mechanical, and chemical. Today, I'm going to focus on selective planting. And in table 8.2, there are approximately 30 plants that they say are less palatable for deer. When I say less palatable, it means that there is no such thing as a deer-proof plant. That you can just find things that they like less than other things, and then you try to plant those. And then here's the 30. But my question is, why don't deer eat certain plants? I've seen lists over the years. I've sat through a number of different discussions on these. So I crossed the list in Integrated Pest Management Manual with a deer book. It's Deer Resistant Landscaping by Neil Saunderstrom. And I couldn't find it for all of the plants, but for most of them, I found 6 basic reasons that deer don't eat plants. The main reason deer don't eat plants is because it makes them sick. It seems that plants have been doing a really good job over the years trying to evolve and keep deer from eating them on their own. So that's one thing, whether they get an upset stomach or it can be so bad that they literally have miscarriages on their fawns. But something in it makes them sick. The second is thorns. If it spikes, and the chances are they'll leave it alone, unless of course it's a rose. Then they like biting off the buds. Texture, they don't like it. Taste, the aroma, smell, and the last one is that deer just can't digest it very well. And this is one, the last one took me a little longer because I couldn't figure, that wasn't in any, it was not in the book. I went through the list, and for toxicity on trees, they don't eat a number of dogwoods. They don't eat the flowering dogwood, the common one, or Cornus cusa, which is a cross between two, Cornus cirrus, I can't pronounce that, the red Aussie or dogwood. But they do eat Cornus mass, a cornelian dogwood, which is why you need to be very careful and look at the scientific names, because it helps you understand what they will and won't eat. And beech tree, you normally see people carving their initials on it. They don't tend to eat that as well. On shrubs, inkberry, hollies, they can make them sick. Yeah, flowering cherry, you see those around the basin in DC, that they don't eat those. You have drooping leucothoe, Chinese juniper, Pyrrhus japonica, spirea, and ferns. The reason deer don't eat the ferns is because it makes them sick. Most of the ferns are toxic. Hellebores, we've talked to those in other meetings. They don't eat daffodils. They'll eat tulips all the time. They love tulips, but the reason they don't eat daffodils is because it makes them sick. And they don't eat marigolds because it makes them sick, and they don't like the smell. Thorns. American and Chinese holly, as you can see here, have thorns, so they don't bother them as much. The native thorn honey locust they won't eat, and I made a note that it's Gladitia tricanthos, and it's not Gladitia tricanthos inermis, which means thornless. If you go to the nursery, you're not going to get the honey locusts that have thorns that are 2 to 3 inches in length. These are the native ones. They leave those alone. Yeah, English hawthorn, and the barberry also can be invasive, and barberry also have bitter leaves. The English hawthorn has been used for, as a barrier in farmers' fields because it gets so thick. Texture, lamb's ear, in the book I was reading, it said they just don't like a mouthful of fluff. And then you have black-eyed Susan, they don't like the texture, it's a coarse texture, they don't like that. Bad taste. Between the pines and the spruce, I thought it was interesting that they have the turpentine taste, and I can understand why they don't like that. And they also have needles and toxicity for the pines, and the bad aroma and the spiky needles on both of those. Bad taste. Oddly enough, and for Scythian peonies, the leaves are bitter. That's why they leave those alone. Birch bark actually has a wintergreen scent to it. Common lilacs, we know that lilacs smell like they tend to leave those alone. And boxwood, a lot of times if you go up to a boxwood and rub it, you can smell the scent of a boxwood, which is not to be confused with Ilex crenata, which is little leaf holly. Those they eat, and they look like boxwood, but they do eat those. Again, the scientific name can be important. And then the Carolina allspice, the leaves are fragrant if you crush them, and they don't like that. And also, not listed on our list, a number of herbs they don't like, again, because they don't like the smell. And then here's the one I had a problem with. I ended up having to go to site on South Texas to find out why they don't eat ornamental grasses. There are over 10,000 of these, and they don't provide any nutrition. The native grasses, sedges, rushes, according to a doctor in Dr. Jerry Parsons, South Texas, deer are not physiologically suited to digest ornamental grasses. If they get nothing but a tummy full of grass, they will eventually die of malnutrition, which is not a good thing. So they just don't eat them. And then, of course, some things I just couldn't find. At this point, I have a list of things they don't eat, and when I tried to research, they said, a lot of the sites said, deer love Russian olives, they love eating chrysanthemum and sassafras. Well, Russian olives has thorns, so that may be why they don't eat them here. So my conclusion on that is what deer eat may tend to vary by location and food available. And then there's some that I just could not figure out why they don't eat them. They didn't come into any of those 6 classifications. And so here are some that, even though I tried to come up with a reasoning, you know, the Potentilla fruticosa, for example, they don't like the gray green foliage, but it's something, people use it for medicine for us, so you'd think they would eat it, but they don't. So, and then here's some resources. Rutgers University has an extensive list of deer plants, and they literally have A through D as to how well they do and don't eat it. And it's University of Maryland also has one. And then again, the Virginia Extension Service, this is the access to that. And thank you for viewing on this. Are there any questions?
If anyone has any questions, they can put it down in the chat or just ask.
Okay, and then we didn't cover sprays or the chemical or the mechanical controls. I can touch on that if anyone wants to know any about those other two.
So Elaine, what do you have in your garden?
Yeah, well, my mom's the one who still has the deer, and she has huge rhododendron, the rhododendron maximum. They're 2 stories tall, and she doesn't have a problem with them. She's, you know, that they prune her rhododendron, and otherwise she has beautiful flowers, so it doesn't bother her. My dad put a fence around the garden that was, I guess, about 4 feet tall, and it's a small garden, so they leave their garden alone. So, and I do plant some in my garden that are deer resistant, and I have the lamb's ear in my garden. The kids love going up and rubbing it, and it makes them happy. So, yeah. But another thing, deer tend to eat into the bird feeders. So my mom has the bird feeders on tall poles. So and the backyard slopes down, so it's a walkout. So she literally, from what looks like the 2nd floor, leans out and puts the bird seed in the bird feeders. So that keeps them out of the bird feeders. So.
Is there a general preference between native plants and others for deer?
Well, there seems to be a combination of both, because some of the plants are native that you say we'd like more of, and some of the plants don't come across to me as native to our area. So some of them they eat, some of them they don't. And the thing is that I call hostas deer salad, but you know, you just try to learn what they don't eat. And with some of my research, trying to figure out why they don't eat them, if you try to find plants that lean more to these categories, you may, you know, it at least gives you an idea why they don't eat them.
Yeah, they had, I forget the one speaker that we had that does, he's kind of a Renaissance man. He came to a lecture, or he gave a lecture last year, the year before, but he said he plants garlic and onion plants all around, shrubs that he wants to protect, because the smell from, you know, just having those other plants nearby is enough most of the time to keep deer away from things that he values.
Yeah, I've heard of plants intermixing things that they don't like with things they do like, with the hope that they just totally stay out of the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Because do you remember we had the Master Gardeners, we had a speaker, Cambry, I forget her last name.
Oh,
and
Larson. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was doing foodscaping where you intermingle, you know, vegetables with ornamentals for the front yard. And she recommended garlic as a border. And I had given a talk on garlic on Tuesday, and I recommended that too. Just it's ornamental. And as you're planting your daffodils or tulips, maybe intersperse some garlic, and then when it's time, you can, you know, just pull up the garlic and enjoy it in your kitchen. So that's worth a try if you have a lot of ornamentals that you want to save from the deer. Just kind of, you know, the decoy type of thing, as you said.
Well, I talked to the Fairfax County wildlife biologist, and she was saying that one of the best things to do to deter deer from your garden, if you have things you don't want them to eat, is to put up a solid fence that they can't see through. Because that way they don't know whether they can jump over it and actually land on, have something to land on the other side, so it confuses them. So because in Fairfax County, you can't have a fence more than 6 feet in height by the zoning regulations. So you can't put a 7 to 8 foot fence up there to try to keep them from jumping over it. And then some people, she said you also could put a double fence. I have a photo of one of those that they can't quite judge how to get over the fence, and they're concerned they can't get back. So they may not jump over that.
Yeah, we see that in the community garden that we are. We don't have big fences, but we have enough trellising, so there's an illusion that there's there's no space to jump. Like the tomato cages and the tomato ladders, that they act sort of like a deterrent too for them getting into the plots, because there's not enough space for them to get in. So the double fencing is a good thing too.
Yeah, and then my mom's garden is so small that they don't jump in because they don't know if they can get back out.
Exactly.
Over that 4 foot, yeah.
Has anyone seen in their neighborhoods a reduction of their population due to the, they do an arrow, bow and arrow, culling, I guess, of the herds in the fall, along the trails, the native trails. Has anyone seen a reduction in deer in their neighborhood because of that?
Do they practice that all over the county? I know I have a friend whose husband is part of the culling program.
Yeah,
But
they post on the, I know, I live off of Braddock and along the Long Branch Trail. They'll post where they do it. I know they're doing it at the Assateague area. They put up signs early on. It's usually around September through, I guess, January, February. But it's well posted in the areas that they're doing it.
Okay, 'cause in Herndon, I haven't seen any, and we've got a little band of deer that walks through the court in back of our house, and our neighbor says, "Do you know that they jump over to your yard?" I go, "Yes, I do."
Yeah, because I think in our neighborhood, we've noticed a reduction due to the county efforts to try to thin the herds a little bit. Because before they were brazenly walking down streets in the middle of the day, and we're not seeing that as much as we had in the past. But it's only a temporary thing. It's that's a constant battle with keeping the numbers, as Elaine said, the numbers in the county are so off the charts with what the land can support.
Yeah, when I was talking to the Fairfax County wildlife biologist, she sent me a chart that said that they took 858 deer last year.
Wow.
Wow.
So,
And they donate those to the food, right, to the food bank?
oh, I would think so.
Yeah, I think that's what they do. I read that years ago. Yeah.
And then the state has a wildlife plan as well. There's a Virginia wildlife management plan by the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. They just recently changed their name. Because I was also talking to the Jordan Green, who's the head of that, and they actually have a map of areas where they're working on trying to decrease deer throughout the different counties. And there's some that are stable, and actually some that they're trying to increase the amount of deer. So I can show you that map if you wanted to see it. But
I had one year jump over a 3-foot fence around my fish pond in February, probably then hit its head on a cinder block in the pond. And I was overseas and came back and saw this odd carpet shaped thing in my fish pond. I thought, well, as I looked closer, I could see there was something under the water, and there was this fully grown dead female deer in my fish pond. And I mentioned this because, like, what do you do with a dead deer in your fish pond in late February? And the answer is not call the county. The county said, if an animal like this dies on your property, you own it. So I had to find an exterminator finally, a certified guy who came out and pulled this thing out with a tarp, as opposed to me trying to lift it out and then have it split open in the fish pond. nasty story, but, you know, such is life.
Interesting.
$500, by the way, is what it cost me.
Yeah.
Wow. Any more questions?
Okay.
Just as an item of interest, I had read, about a month and a half ago, where because of the absence of traffic recently, a lot of wildlife was more comfortable intruding onto certain areas that they would not have ventured onto before. So whether or not that applies to deer, who knows? It's just something I thought was striking.
Well, I know with VDOT, they have signs that they put alongside the road for deer jumping. And according to the Fairfax County Wildlife Biology, she said those signs are not put up by the wildlife people. They're put up by the VDOT based on the number of accidents that occurred there over a certain length of time. So when you're driving down the road, if you see those signs, slow down because they could be jumping. So, which was, I found interesting. So.